Well, we're sitting at 1 o'clock. Pages and notes, and we're not gonna do that. You correct me if I'm wrong. Just to refer to there. Yeah, the intention was to have something really informal with 3 times as many people. So this is what we have, this is what we have, and you have to all be the voice of the whole island. And what I'd ask you to do is, and take the spirit of what we hope this meeting would be and take it to your neighbors and start having the conversation and get back to us. So the intent of this whole meeting was, at the retreat and actually a little before we talked about, communication and how much communication comes out of out of the village. And yet there's no vehicle for communication coming back. And so we wanted to have a town hall that, gave people the opportunity to have a voice. One thing that over the course of the past 8 years, I found on council and as being mayor, you have 5 people up here thinking about what everybody wants. And every 5 of them are sure they know what everybody wants. And the reality is that, I've been here for 3 different councils now. The three councils didn't even decide on what people really wanted. They all differed. And so I think it's important to get some voice coming back to us. But we had the format that we thought we'd take, and we'll do it even more on the meeting now, I think, is that Chris and I were going to talk about the village a little bit, how we operate, what's going on, what some long-term issues are, and then it was going to be this open forum. Anybody have anything to say? Before we go anywhere, though, the stranger at the end, that's our new police chief. Public safety director, I'm sorry.
I can put it up.
Yeah, this is Paul Anderson. He just joined us on July 1st. We thought we'd make him be here for the 4th of July.
Yeah.
And the heat, and he made it to this date, then, that was enough of a vetting process. And before we go, does everybody know everybody up here? Okay, so let's introduce ourselves.
All right, Slaughter Fitzhugh, Village Council.
Jenny White, Mayor Pro Tem.
And I'm Peter Quinn.
I'm Chris McCullough, Village Manager. I'm Jake Kim, the Assistant Village Manager. Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Anderson. I'm the new Emergency Services Director. I oversee our police and fire services here on the island. Come from Arizona, so I have a lot to learn. I'm very excited about a forum like this, so that as a public safety department, we can learn what you guys need from us. So appreciate your input and feedback today. Thank you.
Yeah, and Buddy's listening in too. So if you didn't know, there's another public safety. I don't know what your title is, Buddy.
Our Deputy Chief of Fire and EMS, Buddy Coates, is in the back. He actually runs this place. I'm learning from him right now.
Okay. Well, let's get right into it. When you're looking at the village, one of the people have asked me why I want to be mayor. Didn't necessarily want to be mayor, but once I got into it, I went fasting. There's a level of complexity about the village and the interaction with the different departments and with other entities on the island that is a juggling act that you can't not get excited when you're in the midst of it. And when you're looking at the village, you have communications, public safety, public works, utilities, community. What else do I have?
So we have some unconventional things that the village runs with contractor services. We have storage facilities for the contractors where they can park their IC vehicles and charge their golf carts where they can get gas and diesel fuel to get around the island as they work Monday through Friday. Also, we run the Island Package Center, which is attached to the post office. For many that recall the Island Package Center, years ago, Limited was bringing UPS and FedEx packages to the island. And they had that little shed out in the marina. You had a key, and you go to the Chandler building and get the key, check the key out, and go out to the building and just grab what packages were yours, and then turn the key back in. And then they were averaging maybe 100 packages, a week. We're managing over 80,000 packages through the year. So the developer at one point said, we don't want to do this anymore. And the village council at the time said this is an important enough service for the island residents that we believe that the village should run it and operate. So there's not too many towns that I can think of, Jay, that run a service like that, but that's what we do as well. Mentioned utilities, public works, public safety, our administration. Administration consists of our human resources, our finance, how we pay our bills, how we pay our people, IT, and the clerk, the village clerk. Yeah. So we have about 80 employees work full time for the village. Not the largest, I think we're the second, the largest employer on the island.
Big clips, largest.
Up to the largest set. Real quick, Mayor, it's interesting, even as of yesterday, I had someone ask me, you know, what do I do as the village manager and how, you know, what's sort of, how's that like? And I explained, you know, I'm hired by the council. So the council is elected. Probably most of you know, some people don't, council's elected. I'm hired by the council as a professional manager to manage the day-to-day operations of the village. So that's my responsibility. So,
Yeah, and so, you know, with that, so just from experience, Chris and I talk probably at least 5, if not 6 days a week, and it's just, it doesn't matter what time of day it is or anything. So when you look at your village manager, you should know that, you know, this is not a 9 to 5, 4.5 days, you know, week. This is a real serious cluster that you have to deal with all the time. Yeah. And, you know, when you're dealing with the village, you're also, you know, for the village, our waste. So we have sludge that has to get off the island. So we're dealing with the barge, you know, and we have emergency situations. We're dealing with how do you get people off the island? We're dealing with transportation all the time. The Conservancy does a lot of studies for us, and they try and keep us in line in terms of working with nature, and we have you know, the catch-all phrase that we're all trying to be, you know, in tune with nature, working with nature, and they, you know, they throw reality at that, you know, and question when, you know, if there's been a lot of issues over the years that, you know, Chris hasn't agreed with everything we've done, and that's critical to us that we know when he doesn't agree with us and when he feels open to tell us his opinion. And, you know, the scientists that are working with him are critical to our operation. Association, you know, we have a situation right now where legislature has changed on one of our operations, and we need more land. We need more clearance around our operations, both sides. And we don't have it. And matter of fact, our most site is on association property. And so if you think about it, it's like we have a contract with somebody else to do our mulch. We put them on somebody else's property, and yet we're all working together. And as I said yesterday, we were having serious conversations about, well, where are we moving to, or that's got to be our property, and we'll give it something. You know, we don't know yet, but there is an active conversation between us, all the entities. At least once a year, we've had a leadership meeting, which is the head of each organization shows up and we sit around just, you know, what's going on this year, you know, and start doing that. There has been conversation just recently about, you've been talking to Doug about the managers of all the different associations, the different groups getting together. And so when you're looking at our island and looking at how the village operates, it's not just the complexity of the village itself, it's the complexity of the village in a much broader community.
Yeah, it's a couple of things to add with the Timber Creek mulch site, like a lot of things on the island. These are things that have evolved over the last 30 years, more or less, as you know, the developer came in and when they first purchased the island, they set systems in place that have, there's still some of those exist, and the mulch site is one of those. And so, yes, you know, the association owns the land and we have a lease agreement with the association to be able to continue to manage that program. That is a program that the village runs, a service that the village provides to property owners. We need their degree, that they landscape handle process. What's the other thing I was going to mention? Yeah. The other thing I was gonna mention is with all the organizations, right? I can't tell you how many times I hear somebody say, "Oh, you work for Baldwin Island." Like Baldwin, like everybody works for Baldwin Island. That is not the case. Like there's five major, what I would consider five major organizations that with the Conservancy and Christianity being one of them here, and of course the Baldwin Association, with Old Baldy and the clubs. And so, yeah, we do try to get together routinely to talk about issues of concern and just to get together and talk and build that relationship, because what most people often say is we're all in this sandbox together, right? It's a small sandbox, we're all in it together. So we got to work together to figure out sometimes complex, interrelated issues that we're faced with.
A real good one is when you look at stormwater management and sewage management, we can't do that without the golf course. And so when you're looking at, wastewater, gray water leaving our plant, it's going to the lagoons. And if we have a storm coming, you'll start noticing those lagoons going down. And that's a coordination between the village and the clubs just to get ready for a storm. Yeah, so there's, yeah.
And a little bit symbiotic too, because when we usually have our droughts in July, June, July, the demand for water here goes way up because there's so many more people on the island. So that what we call the gray water that is used for irrigation, the volume of that is increased and you can keep the grass on the golf course healthy. So it's it works both ways.
And Mayor, real quick, I do want to introduce someone that is also important in the room here, Karen. Karen is our public information officer. So all the village's voices that you get and all the updates we send out, that's Karen. And
our website.
Code Reds, and we have water issues. That is Karen. She's the go-to on that. And so I say that because, going back some years ago, our level of communications compared to today, I would say is non-existent. I think over the last 6 years, at least, more or less, we've improved so greatly in how we communicate with folks. And I hope everyone in this room gets those villages' voices, because as an example, after every council meeting, we do a post-council recap. And to get that information out so that folks know what this council's doing, things that we're working on, the important issues. And we even recently put those into podcasts so that, a lot of people, a lot of information to read, but on a ferry ride, you can put your earbuds in and hear in 20 minutes what happened at the last council meeting. They're great. I listen to them. I really enjoy them. So.
Something you can sign up for to get alerts and all too.
Right.
Tell folks about that.
Okay, well, there's two different things that we mainly push out. Our e-blasts, which are Village Voice e-newsletter that goes out every month after the council meeting. And then we do announcements regularly as needed through that same e-blast. So you can sign up for that. It's very easy on the website. You can do that. You can email me, or anybody with the village pretty much knows how to get somebody signed up on that. Code Red is the same, but that's for emergency notifications. That's typically if we need you to do something, take action, not drink your water, evacuate the island, you need to do something, get all your furniture off your decks, things like that. And that's also on our website, on our homepage. And again, contact me if you can't get there somehow. But I think recently in the BHA's newsletter, I had a guide to all our communications in there. So that was a comprehensive article on how we outreach to everybody on various methods.
Thank you, Karen.
If we get, so that's just getting the village through the day. You know, so the different departments we're talking about, the complexity that, you know, I enjoy is just day-to-day activity. And what is critical with the village, any entity, you know, you have the village, we get through the day, and we gotta start, there is that, you know, living with nature aspect of it, the blanket that goes over everything and directs what we do a certain amount. Then there's, you know, we are 3/5 built out, plus or minus, around there.
Yeah, we're about 65% built out, so another 35% more or less.
So when you're looking at our policies, you know, and how our policies actually come about, this village is strained right now. You know, when you look at the traffic, you look at, you know, how we're getting around, what are we doing with parking by the beach? These are new problems. And as they've been around for a few years, but new in the sense of the village growing, and they're only going to get worse. And so we're constantly trying to develop our policies to start addressing all these things as they come along. It was fascinating. Chris shared with me a drone flight over East Beach.
Yeah.
And the parking and the whole notion, well, you can't get an ambulance through there. You know, if anything ever happened, we'd be in trouble. And so immediately the next day we were talking about, well, we got to change the parking. And so there's plans that have to be put together. And I think the same thing, you know, another one that came out of the 4th of July is the garbage. You know, you have, you know, all of a sudden you have 10,000 people, which was, I don't know whether it's a record, but, you know, I always thought of when I first came here, I've been here for 20 plus years. If you had 5,000 people on the island, you'd be like, oh my gosh, where are they? You know, just there's so many. And then 7,000 was unbelievable. And this weekend we had 10,000. And so if you imagine 10,000 people who all on Saturday decide they're going to dump their trash, you know, there's no way you can prepare for that. It's like trying to prepare for, you know, 20-inch rainstorm. So we're coming up with policy. What are we going to do? Where this problem really is.
Yeah, I mean, those, and I think we can all recognize, right, that those are a snapshot of time out of a whole year. And so that is a challenge for small coastal communities like us. I mean, we're not immune to those things that Wrightsville Beach that we're dealing with over 4th of July either, with the mass influx of people wanting to find a place to park to go to the beach. We can manage it. We're managing it a lot better than Wrightsville Beach is at this moment, with the exception of a few areas. But yeah, I think it's definitely things that we identify and recognize, and that we need to work to improve. And then I just want to say, as far as from where I sit, when I think about things around the island, my mindset is always about the build out. What is it going to be like, that island build out, the capacity to manage things? And one of the biggest things that we've been working on over the last 2 years was the engineering and design and permitting of the wastewater treatment plant expansion. Because on the sewer side, the treatment of the sewage part is, the current plant is not built to meet build out capacity. So we've known that, and we've been, during each annual retreat over probably the last 4 or 5 years at least, we've been monitoring those numbers of, you know, what percentage of the island is developed, what is our annual historical permitting of new construction, and how many empty lots do we have left to build on. And so as we track all of that, we position ourselves to be ready to do that expansion. Because in North Carolina, if you're not in that position to expand, the state will come in and put a moratorium on you. and halt any new construction. And obviously that's, we don't want to be put in that position, so.
Well, maybe we do.
Yeah.
That's another debate. Yeah. But during COVID, we hit a limit that by legislature, we have to be ready, shovel ready, and we are as of a month ago.
Actually, we were very conservative in that because we hit the limit in the peak summer months, but it's a yearly average. And we were well under the yearly average, but we recognize that when the demand in summer months is so high, we don't want the system to go down.
Right.
That would be the
No,
worst time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be very bad.
Yeah.
This is-
Yeah, we used June, July, and August, and we measure our flows for those peak summer months instead of the whole year, like everybody else in the state and all the main. So we take the extra step to be ready.
One thing that, is having, I don't know how many of you know Jerry Maggio, but Jerry loves to get down to every nitty gritty. And he was on council, the last council. And so I had a lot of dealings with him. So I constantly still have conversations with Jerry because he wants to know where the money is. And it's great. But we were having a conversation just the other day, and when you look at what happens with our tax dollars and the council trying to come up with a budget every year, he pushes me. He says, "Look, you have three categories. That's it. You have the things you have to do by law, and you have to pay for them. And that's it. Then you have best professional practice." And I think, the wastewater treatment plant is a perfect example of you have to do it. We don't have a choice. Best professional practice. I start looking at a lot of our coastal engineers work. It's critical to us that it is, and our approach to it is best professional way we can do it. And then you have a third category is, I really like to plant some more trees, or I'd like to have public toilets on this island. And that's a variable as, can we make it next year without doing that? Yeah, well, then we better be throwing money in, something else. And so you're always, every year, the budget process, working up the village budget is at least, it's like 4 months for you guys. For the council, it's like 3. There's usually we started something new last year. I think it was in November. We started looking at, when we get to the last quarter of the year, we start really evaluating what happened, what didn't happen, what are we gonna have left over, and start formulating how to push our budget meetings. And then we start with the retreat. Is that when we first started talking about that? February, we started talking about a budget that has to be passed by July. So if you think about that, that's a large part of the year.
Like June 30.
Yeah.
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 I also want to emphasize, I think there's been a lot of, particularly with this recent budget process and with new council members coming on board, an emphasis and with some questions from some property owners too about more long-range financial position. I think that's something that we're going to be really focusing on when we get through the season with our finance team to try to paint that picture, if you will. We do have a financial modeling software that we incorporated, I think, three years ago now, to help us with that. So we'll be working on that. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned one of the biggest priorities, I think, obviously, is shoreline protection, managing our beach. If we didn't have a beach, I don't know what Broadhead might look like. If we didn't have the dune system that we have to protect all the public and private infrastructure behind that dune system, like the club and the golf course, what the island might look like and not look like. So,
Yeah, I don't know how long you've all been on the island, but there are 2 lanes of road in front of the club. There's only one there right now, but there was 2. And so you imagine what happens, and that's one of the things that happens. And so we're very protective of our homes. And that's, when we're looking at, we were talking about day to day, then there's long-term. And so there's a handful of things that we're working on right now, that, are long-term. And some of them not as long-term as others. And the most critical one right now is, I don't know whether anybody's aware of the sand management plan, but we get sand from the dredging in the channel. It's on a six-year cycle. First 2 years, we get sand. 4 years, we get sand. 6 years, we've been saving up 6 years of the taxes to pay for that season when we paid. And what is not sustainable, we try and generate $3 million of taxes a year for sand that we need after 6 years. And so we start new, start a new debt every 6 years. This past year was 18 million. And that's, for a small community, that's a lot of change. So some things we're doing. So the sand management plan, we had our coastal engineers work with the community and started developing the alternate sand management plan. And we presented that to the Corps of Engineers. They're working on it now too, and the game plan. The hope is that we get sand all the time. There is no gap. Our gap year, the sand goes to Caswell Beach. They don't need anywhere near the quantity of sand that they get on that 6th year. But the 2nd year, 4th year, they're down. And so, but it's just, it was politics, this is how the plan was played out. So we're trying to change the plan. Another big issue we have is that in that 6th year, if the sand management plan doesn't happen, we need sand. And we used up sand last session. So we've been going to Jaybird Shoals. These are the shoals between us and Oak Island, kind of. And we can't go there anymore. And so we have permitting and studies being done to try and tap into frying pan shoals. Running into problems with Fish and Wildlife is going to be a federal issue. But we have our lobbyists work in Washington to try and get something going. We have our what is Fish West? He's not very something. Yeah, he's our environmental consultant. He's working on our permitting for frying pan shoals, and the concept we're working on right now is trying to put together a permitting application, which is actually a pilot program that we can do the studies while we're dredging, getting sand, and do some of the studies necessary to make it a permanent permitting process.
Doesn't everyone want the same?
Everyone wants sand, and this is something that comes up too when we're looking at our finances. And it's like, well, how come Oak Island isn't paying? So how come, it's like, and Bald Head Island has, at least in my mind, has always taken the lead on these are the issues. I'm sorry you guys aren't talking, but this is an issue for all of our communities. The other communities know. I have meetings with the mayors of the other local municipalities once a month, and I bring them to what we're doing and point out to them that, hey, we're doing this, and you should be aware of it because you're benefiting from our efforts.
Well, the fact of the matter is, Bald Head Island's never had a choice. If we didn't do anything, where will we be today? We didn't do all the things we've done over the last 20 years. Where will we be today? We had no alternative due to the erosion and our proximity to the shipping channel. So
Yeah, so we've spent more than 75 million for just keeping the beach for and getting better. Yeah, so it's a big important.
it's big, it's very complex, and a lot of moving parts and pieces, and dealing with not with the state, with the other adjacent beach communities. But you're right, Fry Pan Shoal from a regional sand borrow source, it's big, but the obvious is that it's right in our backyard.
Yeah.
you know, what the cost benefit to Oak Island as far as they are away. To be able to tap that source. You know, from a cost benefit perspective, may not be practical for their taxpayers.
One thing to mention too, so every year, this past year, Chris and I went to Washington to meet with our senators and Assemblymen and House and Senate Appropriations Committees. Just to push them to, you know, we have to be funding the Corps of Engineers because we depend on the Corps of Engineers. We're there fighting the battle for the Corps of Engineers to make sure we get our sand. And then also meeting with our senators to try and get funding. And I think love to see the bottom line, but the grants that we've gotten, we just got one, well, that was state at 350. So, yeah, but the last beach renourishment project.
You know, our last nourishment project, we did get a $4.5 million grant from NOAA. Help some nourishment project, which is big, to help buffer the debt on you all to help cover the project. So,
Yeah, that kind of, and this, I mean, it came into question, I don't know, what, at least a year ago, but about, how much money are we spending on lobbyists? And we're spending 120 now, plus or minus, you know, and we have these people working for us all the time. And so it's not one of those things that you throw away. We benefit a great deal.
there's some tangible outcomes with lobbying and some intangible. But
Yeah, the intangible, it's fascinating how much time we get when we're in town. Just walking indoors is great. That's their job to get us in the doors, but they're doing a good job. Yeah.
I'm just looking.
You're looking to see whether we're covered on any
And
basis.
we've been talking for 30 minutes. So
Yeah.
Definitely want to get
Yeah,
the
so-
opportunity.
So let me throw one out to you.
The
Just
last-
one last thing that I
And the
have.
one that I want to just touch upon really with Paul here and Buddy really emphasize our public safety department and how important that is. We know that, right? We know our ability to respond to a fire, to an emergency situation, if you need a paramedic. And then our law enforcement and trying to be as proactive as we can. In managing some of the things that we see going on around the island that we have to deal with.
I want to give a shout out to public safety because for several years, going back 4 or 5, 6 years ago, I'll just call it shenanigans around the island, around the busy, particularly 4th of July week. And just by being out there, riding their bikes and driving around and just, it's calmed it all down.
Yeah.
It's much, much better.
Good. Yeah, so starting the next half of this thing, one of the things that's fascinating about Baldhead Island is that we are so small. And, you know, I thought about some of the things we have to do. We can do anything we want here. I mean, we have an opportunity because we're a small community that, you know, things like this. This is what I want the community, people should feel free. This is what I want to turn out to be like. This is how I want to be living here. And it's a small enough community that we should be able to have those conversations and figure out how we get there. I think a lot of times people look at the village and think of it as like, well, you know, the village is doing this to us, or we get a complaint to the village. It's like, no, we're the village. We can do anything we want if we just decide that that's where we want to put our efforts. And so the idea of being here, there's not a big crowd, but I'd love for everybody who's here, like, go back and say, look, and we have an open slate. What do you think we should be having here? And seeing whether we can keep going in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to set an expectation though that, you know, at least for me, I like to think about 95% of the time we can solve a problem or an issue, but there is another part of the time that, you know, due to things that are not in our control that we can't.
It might be a 10-year solution.
Right, or long-term solution, but yeah. So
I think as being the newest one of the two newest people on the council, one of the things that, you know, you guys pointed out was the complexity of things that I never even thought about as part of the village that we end up doing. And I think Peter's right. If we put our mind to it, we can probably accomplish a lot of things, but there are some limits. One limit is money. And we obviously need to make sure we have money available to handle the big issues that are out there that they've talked about, and we don't know how much it's gonna cost. And so, we've got to be careful. The other is our hands are tied to some extent by state law, federal law, things that we would all look at, everybody on the island would look at and say, well, this makes sense. And yet we can't do it. And so I do think there's a good portion of that people are like, well, why can't we just, change the size of homes that are being built on the island? Well, we don't have the ability to do that because of state law. And so, there are certainly things that I never realized in terms of the restrictions that are put on the village by the state and I'm sure other organizations.
Even by the association.
Yeah. I mean, it's some of the things that seem really simple. You come into a meeting and say, well, this looks simple. And then you're like,
Yeah, or what we were.
sorry, you can't do that. The lawyers then say, no, I'm sorry, that's not.
Yeah. And what we would call unfunded mandates. Unfunded mandates.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, the state's saying, you gotta do this, and it costs money. We gotta figure out how to pay for it to implement it.
Well, I mean, a great example of that is the potential, study with the Army Corps of Engineers around beach management. And it costs us money to do that. It's going to cost us a few $1 million to do that.
Right.
But the benefit might be 10, 20, $30 million over the next few years in terms of having them be kind of more on our side in terms of providing money or assistance. But we got to pay for it to get it done up front. And yeah.
So
There's some questions.
you're up.
So I'll do one. So, all these folks coming to the island all the time. It's one thing to be a homeowner, can't get on the ferry or get off the island. But this island does not run without employees. Here, the clubs, anywhere, and yet they're sitting in lines, standing in lines behind day trippers who are coming, and they're not getting off the island, waiting an hour and a half, get off, and every entity is trying to get good people, keep good people. And I would want to quit. It's Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
And you.
I got an extra 3 hours.
Yeah, an hour and a half, and the ferry's going as slow as it possibly can across the thing. And I just wonder if there's something the village can take the lead in to try to get an exception for at least the employees, if not full-time residents.
And just as an asterisk to that, I made a similar point at the transportation meeting. But Kirk, 100% what you're saying, but I have not seen in 3 years anyone even try to make the waiting in line more tolerable. Like, I hate the waiting in line, but I don't see anyone trying to problem solve it all about how if the only way we can do it is waiting in line, how do we make that safer and healthier? It's like there's just this unwillingness to even pretend to care about the workers. And I'm embarrassed every time I get off the ferry and I see it.
Yeah. But if I could just respond, at least for the village and my employees, knowing though that I only have 80, obviously David Sawyer and the club have 2 or 3 times that during the summer season. I think with the contractor ferry reservation system, which we primarily use, that's been an improvement for us in getting on and off the island. Notwithstanding, I do agree that, some improvements while we're standing there waiting in the reservation line. With the contractor ferry.
I mean, it does the
Nice, but-
infrastructure. They could wrap that line many different ways and let people be in the shade.
Yeah.
And sit down.
So. Yes, I agree totally.
And I know that's not totally under your purview, but it's a community issue that
It is.
continues to not.
Very much so. And let me tell you what's going on with the Transportation Authority right now. So there's I'm on the board of the Transportation Authority, which is a position right now of negotiating, doing work to try and find out whether they can purchase the ferry system. And, the board that's in place right now, doing that negotiation is not the operating board. Okay, so once the negotiation theoretically is complete, there's a whole new makeup that has to happen. And I think, you know, as a village, we should be discussing that now. So how do we position ourselves? How many people are we gonna have on the board that's in charge of the operation of the ferry? How many people do we have? How do we, go to the state legislature or wherever to get our voices heard? Because right now, there's been so much bad blood over the ferry for years now, to the point where there's, you know, the capital improvements, they've been making them, but not in anything that's tangible for a use. As you know, they've been replacing engines and things like that. But waiting in line, you know, is horrible experience. But and my discussions with Chad Paul, you know, it's in charge for him, is that he anticipates negotiations to be coming to a head this fall. Which means that this fall, you know, I'd love to have people, you know, throwing in names, so I want to be involved, you know, I want to be on this committee or that committee or have a say in this fashion. And so.
Especially people with some experience.
With the experience, and so when it comes down to the fall happens, you know, I want to make sure those people are getting appointed by the governor, Department of Transportation. These are, a lot of them are appointed positions, but there'll also be other, I anticipate, other operational groups that should have a say. And so.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I'm not on the transportation authority, so I can probably say more than you guys.
You
because
can.
You guys.
I can't, that's not as much as I can say.
But I think everybody's got to realize that all of the aspects of the transportation system are currently owned by Bald Head Island Transportation / Sharpview. I don't know exactly how that organization's set up right now. But the village has virtually no ability to force to, we can ask, but you all can ask. You know, there's really not much we can do to create more barge space or to put cover over the lines at the terminal. We don't own the property. So I think that what you all need to do, and what I would encourage everybody here, is to follow the Transportation Authority process, because it's going to be critical that the Transportation Authority have enough ability to spend money on those things after they finish the purchase. If they pay too much money for the system itself, the debt they're going to incur, and then adding on top of that all of the capital improvements that you guys and I would love to see, is going to make the ticket prices substantially higher. I think it's likely ticket prices would go up anyway, but I think, you know, everybody looks at it and says, we just want to get it done. Well, that's great. But if it gets done the wrong way, then we're not going to be able to solve those problems. Not we will never solve those problems, because Limited in its infinite wisdom decided not to sell the system to the village, where we could solve those problems. And you could vote out the people that aren't solving those problems, but you're not going to be in a situation where you can vote out the people who aren't doing the job. Transportation Authority is not elected. It's appointed by a whole bunch of different people around the state. And the village right now has 3 or 4 representatives that are on the authority out of 11. So it's 4 out of 11. So even if all 4 of those got together and said, we've got to get this done, no guarantee it's going to happen. So I just want everybody to, it's still very important. And I know people have fatigue over it. I know I do too, after working with the club for 6 years through the transportation stuff. But the problems, the concerns that were there 7 or 8 years ago about the authority are still there today.
Is it up to Limited to say employees cannot have priority?
Yes. Well, it is.
Or is it up to?
No, it's.
I think it's up to the state.
It's up to the state
commission.
It's up to the utilities
Public
commission,
transportation.
but Limited could put cover over the line.
Yes.
I mean, there are a lot of things Limited could do to make it better.
They don't.
They did.
They could wrap that line around the shed.
Sure.
I heard about, when they're coming and going, there's We don't, I'm sorry, I'm at this meeting to troubleshoot.
No, that's fine.
It's not what we're here.
I mean, I would encourage you, if you have things like that, suggestions, send them to Bion Stewart, really, or Chad, whichever one, and just copy the Utilities Commission and tell them, this is how we get it done. The Utilities Commission still controls it right now. So if there are things that shouldn't be happening, they're the ones ultimately that are responsible. But I will say, having worked with Bion and Chad to some degree, they'll listen, they're trying. It's not like they're not trying. I'll give them a lot of credit for the reservation system, because the reservation system makes the ferry significantly better. It makes it better for the employees. It definitely made it better for passengers, other passengers. They have overall the motors on, I think, 3 out of the 4 ferries. Okay, all 4 now. So which has made the ferries much more reliable from a physical standpoint. And the ferries are much more on time during the non-4th of July peak weekends. I mean, they'll never be on time during the summer, but it's better than it was. There's a lot more.
So maybe the question is, at a high level, we know the transportation system is an area of obvious concern with some issues. Are there other things, high level things that you all might suggest to me, to the council, that we might be overlooking? Just to spur.
I'm not for approval, but you have to do all my list.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about this a lot, we had a lot of meetings about this. End of last year. The ICE vehicle situation is still. It is atrocious all year. I cannot tell you, and I know I've said this before, but when you're out walking, even in the winter, unless it's Sunday, I have to jump off the road several times in just a 3-mile loop because there's trucks, enormous trucks, not just the ones that have to carry all the wood and stuff, but these enormous pickup trucks with nothing in them, no people, no tools, no nothing, that obviously would need to be in a big truck. It's just untenable. It's dangerous. And now it's June, July, August, and you have at least as many trucks. And now you have all these people who don't know how to drive a golf cart. So, I mean, we have got to start finding a way to limit that.
Jay can address that real quickly.
Just briefly on the size of the larger trucks that you're talking about. We did amend the ordinances last fall. But with those changes, we were preparing to let folks have a grandfather period. So we just recently ended that for oversized trailers. So that's starting July 1, you have to have standard trailers that meet and fit our ordinances. Now there are certain exceptions and special permits that they can get for that, but for larger vehicles like that, they are automatically renewed as long as you had a permit, a nice permit last year. You guarantee 1 more year for that type of size vehicle. So July 1, 2027 is when you'll start to see smaller vehicles. Now there still will be certain exemptions that we have that we've made in our ordinance for those kind of situations, but you should start to see a smaller number of those larger vehicles next year.
I would count the number of times I have to jump off the road and let you know how it's going. But Dowager, the street we live on, has had 6 or 7 new homes built on it, and it's a tiny little loop. And I mean, I'm not even talking about Dowager. I mean, Dowager's been a nightmare for a while, and it will be until it gets completely built out. The main roads are really frightening. Particularly this time of year when you see people out who don't appreciate this is what's happening. And they got their little kids on little bikes and they're going down Federal Road or they're going down North Baldhead with a twisty part of South Baldhead, and all these trucks are coming and like, we're just accidents. So I'm happy to know we're doing something, but honestly, I just think we need to find a way to limit the number as well as the size. It's just, I know it's because there's so much construction, but when are we gonna start thinking about how can we ratchet down or
So
parcel out how much construction?
So with part of what we changed with the ordinance and making those amendments, I know that some of the members on the council wanted some data, and they want to make certain decisions based on data-driven information, so we made some tweaks to our software applications, and we're collecting additional data that we had before, like, and one of the concerns was actually with the vehicle, not even the lien, they're concerned about the width. And so we're collecting that information and basically let them know 1 year from now, from the point of July 1, we'll have, and even throughout the year, we'll start providing that information as soon as we're approving ICE permits, because they want to know how many of these vehicles are permitted annually, right? What are the sizes of those vehicles? We'll have certain information and data throughout the year, because even with amending the ordinances are always made available to change, right? And council may have different priorities now compared to those in the past or those in the future. So again, with changes we made, they're not set in stone. We can make tweaks to them later down the road, but they want to be able to see some of that to base their decision. They end up changing.
I will also give kudos to you guys, because I'm sure you saw this problem, but there were just regular cars that were making it over, like bringing goods over to houses and stuff. And then we saw on the Facebook page, which is our news source, that they were stopped on the other side. I said, no, that's not. So kudos to you guys for.
Yeah, the whole
making sure
truck
that's
issue.
not threatening to.
Truck issue with pedestrian. That's been going on ever since I've been here, and the the power that we have, the attempt to try, just charge them for, and then they just charge their, the person they're building for more,
Right.
And so it's a very frustrating.
And that it costs them.
Right.
We don't have that. So people own a lot, we want to build a home, and they're fully being built right now. We can't stop that.
We can't put a limit on how many can be happening at any particular time to try to.
It would be nice, but I don't.
It's limited to some degree by the arch also, just the capacity of the arch. But 40 seems to be well within the limited arch, so, because that's been going on now for 30 years or so, at least 40 years.
I've experienced the walking thing as well, but I know on the main roads, has there ever been any discussion? I know this involves money, so. But has there ever been any discussion for like a bike lane, like a walking lane on some of the more main thoroughfares?
There's an easement that'll take you from the harbor all the way to the Conservancy, isn't there?
Well,
Yes.
the Ken Mitchell Nature Trail was established many years ago. There's a map that shows that. And with previous councils have had consultants do bike and pedestrian studies done. And with all of those, at the end of the day, the issue has always been, if you want a separate bike and pedestrian trail, it's going to require to take trees out. It's going to require to encroach on adjacent private properties. So that's always been the crux of it. But to answer your question, yes, it's over the last 20 years, I think we've done about 3 or 4 of those studies. And the end result was always the same.
I mean, a simple solution is to take the median out, right, between all the way from the harbor, all the way out to the east end of the island. But I don't think very many people are gonna want that. And, that nice canopy that we have going over it, take that out, and I imagine this room will be completely packed with people saying, do not do it.
Can we do more about speed?
Yeah.
We don't have any signage there, there's,
So we do have the
Narrative.
18 mile
I
per
know.
hour signage up. We can to some degree regulate the speeding of internal combustion engine vehicles, which we have done. I think we've got data where we've issued civil citations for speeding. We may have issued a few state citations for speeding in ICE vehicles. Now with golf carts, that's a little more trickier because many of the golf carts don't have a speedometer, so if they went to court and tested it, it's likely that they could.
but we gotta solve that, right? We gotta solve that, because these cars go too fast. And without giving public safety a way to enforcing
Right.
speed, we gotta find an answer.
And so, and also to recall, that sandwich board sign that we have also has a radar in it. And we put that around in a number of hotspots. And I recall what the data that came back through that suggested that was on average, most people were doing between 18 and 23 miles an hour. And weren't necessarily going 30 or 25, above 25 or 30 miles an hour. So I'm not suggesting people aren't going fast in golf carts, but to the extent of how much of that's occurring, I could be questioned.
If I could just add, I've been a walker for many years. I walk anywhere from 4 to 10 miles every day. And so I'm always looking for those because just this year, I've almost been killed 3 times. As people are taking, they love taking a corner and just, I've gotten very good at hopping off the road, and I'm usually not on the road many of the times, so. But there are not that many 18-mile-per-hour signs. And I sense when I have mentioned to people, they think 18 is like a cartoon number. It doesn't, where else would you find 18? Now I know it's quaint and it's kind of defining a bald head, but people take that as a joke. So, feedback. So I'm still here. So I think my skills are still, as I'm aging, I'm still able to move pretty quickly. But I think that should be looked at, either the number of these signs, what the speed limit is. Maybe you take it to 20, I don't know. But there's something that people, or you have it when the golf carts get registered, a sticker goes in the cart that says speed limits, just so people have that. So it's not like, well, geez, I didn't know. And it's,
Yeah, let me just say too, I didn't mean that comment to come back as being dismissive. Because I do see it, I personally see it when I'm out and about, that folks in these golf carts, and it's all in the individual user, the operator, that some of us, like me, as I'm coming up to pedestrians, I slow down, I take my foot off the pedal, and I just come to a slow speed as I pass people. A lot of these other people, it's pedal to
they
the
cut
floor.
it.
It's pedal to the floor. There's no attempt
Exactly.
to slow down, at least slow down. So I hear you.
And I think we're isolating the problem a little bit. So when I look at this, there's a level of density. So it's getting more and more dense, more and more drivers.
Yeah.
There's the construction, because it's filling in, is spread out more. It's not like you have, when they were building Cape Fear Station, it was like construction, it's Cape Fear Station, there's all the construction workers are down there. And now it's like, well, there's a house here, there's a house here. So you have that traffic between them. And so I've had conversations recently with John and with Katie, and when we're looking at a bigger issue is how much do you want this island built out? And we're looking at, we're only, what we said, 60% plus or minus. And it's like, well, it's laid out for, like that many more coming. And it's not just the traffic, it's like, well, I'm the last house being built on the street. Where are they gonna put the wood that we're gonna build from? Well, I'm gonna put it on your front yard or it's gonna be blocking the street. So there's a problem that I don't think the developer ever kind of wrapped his head around, how big are the streets? Well, the streets, love the size of the streets, but you can't have a pedestrian, truck, and a golf cart all running on these size streets. And so the question of, when do we get a consensus? So we're gonna lose some trees because we gotta find a way to snake a pedestrian path through here, or we gotta figure out a way to have John buy back the island. So there are programs on the island, Silt and the forest keepers, yes, to actually start buying up the undeveloped properties and, let's shrink down our growth. Or control our growth better.
How many, we think we have about 3,000 golf carts on the island in that general number. You think about that, if you had 50% more houses, you're gonna have 4,500 golf carts on the island. And so You could go walk out there and just think, we're gonna have 50% more golf carts driving around. Driving around.
So we
I hope we don't, but we might.
Personally.
we have about 3,500 golf carts registered.
It will be 5,000 golf carts by the time, if we ever get fully built out. Now,
Each new home, you can add an average of 2 golf carts per house, so.
And some of them are bigger and they're doing
And
3 and 4.
they're doing more.
well, and you got contractors, you've also got contractors golf carts, and they're gonna, you know,
You said that we're built out 60% plus. Is that commercial and residential, or is that, so that's a total?
There isn't that many more commercial, there's commercial properties left, but I think we're talking about residential properties.
Yes.
Is it,
Yeah.
I'm talking about residential.
Yeah.
60%.
Yeah,
But not to be a math nerd, but a different way to kind of put a big red circle around this is instead of saying we're 65% built out, it's also true to say there's 50% more homes coming.
Yeah.
We are going to grow by 50%.
It's more than that, actually.
Yeah,
We have
but
1,000 single-family homes, we just passed that border, and we have 750 lots left.
so, I mean, it's not that it's a problem like a third, which is the way it still sounds like, it's that we have 50% or more growth out there waiting unless we make choices and do things differently.
yeah, and the other piece of that is to think about how much the average one of those single family properties sells for today. And, you know, the smaller ones are selling for 100,000, maybe 80, 75. The big ones are selling for, there's 2 listed on the beach right now for 3.5 million. So, you know, it's somewhere in between that is the average. I don't know what it is, but it's a lot. And, you know, if it's $300,000 and we're looking at 700 lots, it's more money than the village, the people in the village. I mean, it's not like we're just gonna go buy these homes. You know, we can buy some, and every one we don't buy, every one we buy is one less that gets built, which is great. But the solution to say, hey, we're just not gonna let these people build on the property they have, we're gonna try to buy their property out from under, which a lot of them would be happy to sell.
Yeah.
I don't think we can buy our way out of growth. But I think we do need to we're already doing it. We do need to continue to really put at the forefront planning for our infrastructure, given that growth is coming. Whether that's non-motorized or the treatment plant
So
or signage
So
or
the
whatever.
cost of that, you're gonna start to see the cost of that with the sewage treatment plant. That's one we don't really have a choice, and it's infrastructure we have to build. That cost is gonna get borrowed over a period of time. Hopefully, we'll get some grants that will pay for some of it, but if we don't, people are gonna see a pretty hefty increase in your utility bills in order to pay this. So, you know, we can do the same thing with bike paths. If we can raise the money and spend the money, it's your money. And we can build bike paths and cut down some trees and make the roads wider and all that, if that's the direction that people want to go. But I think when you get down to it and you start cutting down the trees and you make the roads wider and you have bike paths, you got a lot of people that are gonna walk in this room and say, wait a minute, first of all, I don't want my taxes to go up by 15, 20, or 30% in order to pay bike paths. And number 2, I like the trees and I like the look of the island.
I think what people are asking for is not necessarily bike paths, it's for motorized traffic to go slow. Because the separated bike lane encourages motorized traffic to go faster, not slower. So I think it's a range of ideas. And maybe I have seen in communities, that's a healthy place for like the citizen advisory board, is non-motorized transportation. And so people who have a whole range of concerns and ideas, the thing that connects those is that they are organized around non-motorized transportation.
But even when I watched the kids on their electric scooters and their electric bikes and their, I used to call it skateboards, but you know, they're more fast. They aren't even wearing helmets, they're required to, but the parents let them do this. I think it's such ridiculous. And they're speeding around pedestrians and around golf cart traffic with the band like this thing. So it's
That makes me, it's me from my I don't think people on the island vacationers appreciate how dangerous something is. And the one thing that we try to stop all the time is is the people who are carrying an infant on their lap while they're driving, not realizing that if anything happens, either they crush that baby or that baby goes. And they just think that it's no big deal. I don't think they appreciate how often carts flip over, carts tip over, people get thrown out of carts. And you guys know it happens all the time. And I don't think anyone understands that. I think it would be helpful if we could take on some sort of public education, public communication that says, this is what happens when you carry a child in your lap.
Well, let's see, Karen, address these, we have any.
Well, you do have, it is Golf Cart Safety Month, and I just did put it on the bulletin board outside the IPC today. It does touch on a lot of the things that were said today, the 18 miles an hour. The baby carrying thing is something that it's a sticking point right now. What I've been told as far as communicating that is there is no child safety seat for a golf cart made by a manufacturer where we could really legally recommend that. So the best thing we can do is just stop every person we see that's doing something stupid, like carrying their baby in their lap, and tell them not to do it.
And we can do that in the next slide, but we're also working with realtors to get information out to.
Oh, yeah.
Visitors,
guide.
we have guides, a lot of effort to communicate. Not everybody reads it.
People respond when you tell them, you're gonna get $250 ticket. You're not gonna be able to talk your way. And they go, oh, okay. Then they move the.
Let's have a comment unrelated to each other. Somebody that comes to my house that has a baby did purchase a soft golf cart, big toddler seat. Not for an infant, but for a toddler, and it's meant for golf. I'll find out who makes it. The other thing I would like to say is, when I first moved here in 1999, there were 2,200 buildable lots. Our number has reduced by how many? Because of erosion, because of people building on multiple lots, because of various reasons. So I purchased knowing that there could potentially be 2,200. I actually kind of am glad to see the numbers reduce just through natural attrition or erosion, unfortunately. The other comment I want to make, I am both an employer and a full-time resident. I run the Obali Foundation. I have 4 employees that ride the ferry every day. It has nothing less than completely and totally frustrating as an employer. I also in my home employ people, like people that house and the cottage industries, not necessarily I think the ferry schedule change was atrocious. I think that taking 2 lanes out of an interstate at rush hour in the morning and in the afternoon has been extremely detrimental. And Davis, and I have to defend Davis. We are a publicly accessed with a publicly regulated utility transportation. And I say this every time I'm in a meeting like this. We get lots of funding because our beaches are public, owned by the state of North Carolina. If you turn into a Fisher Island, one of those exclusive, only property owners can visit, you become a figure-8 island that gets no beach nourishment, that gets no federal, because the public has no. Obali Foundation depends on Davis. 50% of residents come on that area. And the island economy, whether you want, day visitors are going into Cape Fear Distillery, day visitors are eating at Jules. Jules's 2 busiest lunch days are Monday and Tuesday because of things. So that is my, I also would suggest, knowing the system and how it operates. I would suggest anybody that has a problem with any element of transportation should call and file a concern or complaint with North Carolina Utilities. I was on their website a couple weeks ago. There have been no public comments of staff recently. And I would suggest concerning the fare schedule change, the concern for property ownership. I would suggest you call them and file a written email with them and tell them your opinion of how the utility commission is operating. Because the public and staff is there to look out for the consumer, not for the transportation. They are there to protect the customer service for the consumer, the pricing. So I was on the phone with them not too long ago. They are open and receptive to public comment and for users. And I want to say users, employers, property owners, business. In my 27 years, I've never seen anything like the Ferry Landing platform. You have single mothers that are trying to pick up their kids at daycare and they get bumped from a 5:50 boat and they're in another boat till 6:30 on a Friday night. You know, this is, and I try to hire dedicated professional people. And two of them drive from Wellington. And their commute keeps getting the ferry's going slower, that's 10 more minutes. You have to be in line a half an hour early. I have to pay them to stand in line. You know, so my frustration level is like off the roof. And I can't even imagine the club or everybody else. But when I see the poor contractors getting bumped from the contractor, run into the passenger, getting bumped from the 516 passenger, and they're all standing there. And the other thing about the utility commission is you cannot discriminate between users. You cannot give certain users benefits that all the other users don't. So you can't say property owners are first, employers are second. It's because it's publicly regulated, not discriminate between users. So I know that's a lot, but I don't have very many opinions.
You guys both had your, let Diane go first, because she's.
Yeah, my primary concern, and I know this, a lot of you are already aware of it, is the water treatment. And I don't know where we stand on upgrades, but you say you have single family homes here, but then you have 20 people piling into a house.
Yes.
That are showering, flushing toilets and doing whatever. And I really and truly worry about that plant, because if that plant goes down, we are all off this island. You would have to evacuate. You just have no water, no sewer. Where do we stand on the upgrade?
You're talking about the expansion.
Yes.
So,
And
just
where
got.
are we expanding to?
Well, we just got that there.
Yeah, so we got the draft permit from DEQ, which essentially we're shovel ready. It's just a matter of timing to actually initiate construction, which is something that council has been talking through.
Talking through with our public works director, Budget Buchanan. It really is tough.
I would say, you know, our ability to meet the demand for treating the sewage through June, July, and August. You know, I told Jay, have JP provide an update on what the gallon per day numbers look like, but I've not heard that we're an issue at this point. Our plan is rated at 350,000 gallons per day. And if we're at 200, 220, 225, there's still capacity there. So.
Cause I know there's like 38 or 40 homes under construction already.
Yeah, we have a ways to go before we're gonna have any real capacity issue. But we are at a point, we're getting closer to having to start constructing based on the usage that we have. If you look at just the summer usage, as Jenny pointed out, if we looked at all year, the average year usage, which is what Southport does, we're nowhere close to having that. Now, the plant would probably die at some point in the summer if we looked at it that way. But I think that's one area that, being new to council and not knowing a ton about this before I went on, pretty confident in the plans that we have for the new treatment plant. It's going to be in the same place as the old. So it's going to be an expansion, truly an expansion of that building.
Do we know when that's happening?
We're estimating 2029. Start.
We have enough reserve right now not to have to start construction right away. And we've been monitoring the reserve constantly. So I think that, and how fast construction is.
Yeah.
So I think that, if anything, we'll be more than conservative when we're trying to pick out the date when we're going to start.
And we're working steadily on an app to be, as we shovel ready now. We're working with engineers and consultants and also looking at upgrades to equipment that help to resolve problems.
But you're looking at, if we were to start today, we're gonna go borrow a little over $40 million, and your water bill is gonna go up $1,500 a year. So we could start today and make everybody happy, but there's no point in making everybody's water bill go up $1,500 a year until we really need to. And that gives us the time to start working on grants and other sources of funding that might reduce that.
Yeah, but I think the answer to your question is need to. Need to might be here. And, we're gonna be hitting need to before we ever get to need. If that makes sense to you.
We'll do it before it gets critical.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know Chris and I discussed this many years ago. Have you looked into any more on limiting the capacity of rental homes? Other jurisdictions and resort areas have done it successfully, where it's 2.5 people per bedroom. And so you can't have these 5-bedroom houses that sleep 18 and advertise it as such. And I know what you're gonna say is like, how do you enforce it? Well, make the fine heavy duty. You get $1,000 a day that you have too many people in that house, and they'll figure it out pretty quick. It has been successful in other jurisdictions, and I know when you're on septic, it really matters.
Chris, I know that we've approached our attorneys about this. I know we've talked about it, and we'll look back into that because.
I think that's part of the service load of the island. It affects the ferry, it affects the garbage pickup, it affects the water and sewer, it affects everything. And why these people feel like they need to have a rental house that sleeps 18 or 20 people is beyond me. You still only have one dishwasher and one washer and dryer, and so I have researched it, and it has been successful near Asheville. In certain municipalities, and you have to apply for a license from the municipality in order to rent your own. You have to, provide information on how big your house is, how many bathrooms it has. And quite frankly, that starts to reduce the number of golf carts too, because obviously a house that sleeps 20 people needs 4 golf carts,
So Chris, again, the community does work as a whole. And the club came up against this a few years back with guest memberships.
Yes.
And so what the club did would say, if you have a 5-bedroom house, you can get 10 guest memberships. And they're not just handed out like, oh, you just show the guest. They've got a photograph and a name and an age on them.
Yes.
And we allowed 2 extras to have bunk beds for children.
Uh-huh.
So that has made a difference for those people who want access to the club or their renters.
Right.
Because renters don't want to come in and say, put 20 in the house, but only 12 of us can go to the club.
Exactly.
But I'd say, 75% of the rental houses on the island, at least not the rental houses, but the the people that rent here don't join a club. They
Yeah.
come here for the beach and they drive around and who knows if that's the people with 20 or people with
Right.
5, I don't know, but.
It is something, it vastly affects the transportation company because of all the crap they bring up.
Yeah, one of the things that I think we did this year was we added another level to the sewer, to the utility rate, which if you're over $11,000 a month, your rate goes up. So
11,000 gallons?
gallons, yeah,
Oh, okay.
a month your rate goes up. I think there's ways we could continue down that path where, if you're one of the heavy users that's causing us to have to upgrade the sewage treatment plant, maybe you should pay more.
Yeah, I mean,
That seems fair.
The vision for the island has always been, and I don't begrudge anybody that can build a big, beautiful house, but those rentals were like killer gray cottages and, they weren't, 6 bunk beds in a room and pack them in and, I just think that's just, I think that's one of the things that the village needs to get control of.
Okay.
Capacity.
Look at that.
Let me go back here first, yeah.
Other than waste management, as you think about build out, what are y'all's top concerns? Other than that,
Well,
you talk about over and over.
Yeah, I think there is a reality that we're already confronting in a lot of places. A few years ago, you ran into it on your street. When there's construction going on a street that's 70% built out, there's nowhere to do a laydown area. And trucks, you get a construction site with 2 trucks in front of it, and there's no room for 1 truck. So
And then emergency vehicles can.
So
Like if
there is a level of planning and we, this more than a year ago, I think that Stephen Boyette, our building inspector, has been working with public safety and the contractors and really trying to address that issue. But I know it's gonna get more and more, there's gonna be more aggravation. And so I'm really worried about it.
Parking is one that's come up a few times recently. If you think about, if you've tried to go off the island on the ferry and you try to park down there at 10 o'clock in the morning, I don't know where you're parking. If you don't have a yacht club sticker, you can park in the yacht club space.
And this isn't a build out issue as much as it's, if you take that scenario and say, oh my gosh, that's gonna be horrible. What if they build that house and there's nowhere to do stuff? Think of it in X number of years when all of a sudden we are closer to build out and the houses are 40 years old and now you're doing renovation. Now there's no laydown area. Now there's nowhere to do stuff. And so the transportation issues are that there's gotta be some alternative solution that we haven't touched on.
I have one to throw out there, and that's the differentiation between residential services and commercial services that the village provides. And examples are with our waste streams. And should the village taxpayers be funding, handling waste streams of the commercial businesses? That's an issue we've been dealing with, is in trying to manage that. The other one is similar fashion with our IPC and how we manage our packages. We've had some businesses that funnel their packages to the IPC. And there's a massive volume there that we're trying to manage. And should that be strictly for residential purposes?
And of course, you add to that, Chris, as you know, you start charging, if businesses have to start paying for that or find other expensive ways to handle it, guess who gets to pay for it?
Right now, we lose money on the IPC. So, we're spending money so that people get their packages. It's, the load is intense and I think what was the other one that the waste
Recycling.
Yeah, recycling.
Cardboard.
So when you look at if you've been there over the weekend and it's just overflowing, well, it's not made for the commercial entities to be dumping their stuff in. It's residential. And so
It's surprising how many people come to sign. Can't read the word cardboard. Stop or park.
Yeah.
Seems huge.
So the numbers are, we're at 1,000 homes now?
I think we're probably about 1,350 units.
Okay,
Most of that is residential. Probably about 750 lots we have to build on, so about 2,100, give or take.
But the problem is, and we've looked at this various times, there are lots that are plotted, but they're not buildable because they're wetlands or they're.
Well, that's 750.
It tries to adjust for that, but it is a very moving, it's a difficult target.
It's fluid.
The other
It
thing-
is fluid.
Other thing we've looked at over the last few council meetings is commercial space that can be converted into residential. So there's probably 7 or 8 acres of commercial space that could be built out as residential today at 14 units per acre. So, you know, there's another 100 or so units that could be built. Now, they won't all be built as residential, and they won't be built all at 14 units per acre, but that's something that we looked at, trying to figure out how could we solve that. That's the reason there's a current moratorium on building on certain commercial lots right now. But the mechanisms for controlling that are very limited from the state standpoint.
I think for me, the other big one that Mayor brought up, just to reemphasize, is the debt. It's associated with paying back these private beach nourishment projects that we have to do on that every 6th year, where we have to pay it off by the time that we get to the next 6th year. In our efforts with the sand management plan reevaluation, if we can figure out a way to get sand every 2 years through that we can reduce the debt, therefore reduce the tax rate, because quite frankly, the village's tax rate that we know is extremely high. But the reason is because we're having to fund that debt to pay back that multi-million-dollar project, whatever that 6-year period. So if there's a way we can work.
Build 750 houses, and the cost for the sand renourishment will be much smaller per house.
Great idea.
Well,
Great idea.
Like that?
The rate will be different.
but it'll give the village, if we could reduce that, that would afford the village the opportunity to take those funds, that revenue, and do other things with it, like pave more streets. Or do other improvements around the island that we know we need. So again, it's complex and we're balancing and juggling at the same time.
I want to just give another example. Everybody was thrilled when we got 2 new fire engines. Big ladder truck. But then when we started trimming trees to allow them to pass. People weren't so.
Yeah.
We heard a lot about it, so, there's always a bit of a give and take, and we have to do it as best we can.
Can I mention, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
One other angle or facet to the demographics is, 15 years ago, we had around 200 full-time residents, which constituted about 10% of the population of the structures on the island were inhabited by full-time residents. That number went down to close to 100 before COVID. We almost breached 100 full-time residents. It was that low. And we've had a bit of a rebound. So we have about 160 full-time residents. But where that was 10% of the population 15 years ago, it's now nowhere near 5% of the population. So as you think about the texture of our community, no one ever thought that this would be majority full-time residents, but we used to have a more vibrant full-time resident population than we do now. And it's nobody's job to get full-time residents to move here. Nobody invites them to move here. We are in Brunswick County, which is arguably the fastest growing residential county in the country, maybe. We get none of those people. So of the people who are full-time residents, half of them have jobs. So in terms of retirees moving to Ball that island, no one invites them, and they aren't coming. So
What do you guys think of full-time population?
what do you think about it?
That's always been tough to gauge or to project because of the nature of the community. It's a second, I'm understood.
Right.
doing population projections on Hawken
I
Island.
see, but like ballpark, what do you think?
I said the other day, I
Voter
thought,
registration.
I thought that 80% of the homes were on some sort of rental program. Ballpark. But it's not that high.
Registration is not.
Going through the voter records, it's no one do that. But I mean, maybe if they're not voters.
You have US Census data, which.
No.
No, I'm just saying, that we're.
Pardon?
350 US, yeah.
Yeah, if you look at the voter records, but there are, if you go through those and vet them a little bit, we could be wrong, but we've gone on the margin, but it's under 200.
I guess I take your point and I totally agree with you. I have a different impression, which is that post-COVID, there's an increasing number of people here who are either full-time or are here more than they're anywhere else. And so I think we're at an opportunity post-COVID to really do exactly what you're saying. Start to build a community of people alongside the traditional here for the summer, rents and time to return. But there is sort of a growing community of people here who are here more than they're anywhere else, and who think of this as their primary home, even if they're not here for 2 weeks to get with you.
How do you?
Colchac residents, my next door neighbor, she leaves for the summer and rents her house, but she's a resident. So even if you took how many rental homes there are they year-round rental home? You know, I mean, it's just such a squirrely number to come up with.
I think, I have my own take on this too. Like what, I look at this island and, I always thought of the attraction of the island was you have a special community that tourists want to come to, as opposed to a tourist situation that a handful of people live in. And there's an awful lot of, what I was saying earlier that, granted, there's regulations about what you can and can't do. And we can define our own, society here to a certain extent. And if you are generating an atmosphere and a community that attracts people, I think they'll come, or they'll come and stay. I think right now, there's always, as long as I've been here, we find a good meal. Yeah, and the complaints don't seem to go away, and the amenities don't, there's aspects of the amenities that are shortfalls. But I think if there was a demand, those things would start to, appear. I don't think that, so I think it moves us to all start to have more serious conversations.
Well, we didn't bring it up.
What we want to do.
Limited, right, had a program where you ought to live on Ball Head Island 20 years ago, and a lot of us did. And when they created a vacuum, no one else invites anyone to live on Ball Head Island. There aren't people moving in from Chicago.
But it's fascinating.
15 years ago, because no one invites them.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's the village's fault, by the way.
Well,
I don't know
they
where
have
that-
all the marketing too.
Yeah.
They have marketing up in the north and come down, all inclusive, will from planning and designing of the home to construction. They have it all in house.
I do think the profile of the real estate purchaser, I mean, obviously they first start as a guest, they either come for the day or come on vacation, fall in love with the island. But as I've seen in real estate over the years is back in, 2000, 2005, before the recession really hit in, buyers could afford the home on their own as a second home. And sometimes they chose to rent it. The profile of the buyer now, to me, is definitely going into it as an investment. And, okay, we can build this home or buy this home and we can use it sometimes, but we also can generate income from it. And I think it's more investment minded as opposed to pleasure minded. That's what I've seen from COVID.
So I think some of that's changing a little bit in that some of the people that bought right after COVID, there's a fair amount of turnover now in the homes of people that came here thinking, I'm gonna make a lot of money because I can rent this thing 18 weeks a year.
Right.
And when they found out they can only rent it 8 weeks a year, it just doesn't quite work out.
Right. And then
so Yeah,
Yeah.
and so there has been some of that. Now, they might still be selling those homes to people that are still looking at it as an investment. I don't know, but there has been some turnover.
I just had a question for Paul. About, reading about other communities having drones and safety equipment. And if you stand down on East Beach, by the shoals, and it's low tide, you see all those folks out, you see people caught, barely get back. And we wondered, should this island have safety drones that can go out and drop equipment while until you guys can show up?
I'll let Buddy speak more specifically to it, but I do know that we do have a drone program currently. I'm not sure what the payload capacity is, what its functions are yet, but I'll let Buddy speak to that.
Yeah, so we currently do have a drone that can drop the water rescue can down to somebody in the water. We can also monitor it we have a big box with a TV on it, so we can see it real time. We can communicate with them. We just used it July 4th flying over, but nobody knew, or we do have that capability.
I did not realize.
And we've worked with the Schultz number of years ago. Directly to put some signage up down there, warn folks ahead of that, so.
And I see people ignoring it, ignore the dunes, and they're out there one day.
And they're allowed to vote.
Pardon me?
And they're allowed to vote.
Yeah.
I have one other quick question about volunteerism, safety. I know that for years there was a pretty healthy volunteer group that helped with fire, particularly with the fire fighting. And then I understand that there were a lot of volunteers on the list, but they weren't really here anymore, or they're aging out of the system. And then the previous administration of public safety wasn't so much pro volunteerism. How do you guys feel about fire safety volunteers? Are you looking for volunteers still? Or is it sort of we got it?
Yep, so we have 18 volunteers right now. We have it broken down into support staff. That doesn't include the PSA.
Right.
So we have 18 people that actually do respond out to calls. When you look at our population, that's a pretty good ratio. And we do have a application process online through our portal that you can apply to be a volunteer as well. So we're currently looking at what we need help with.
I don't sleep, which only makes me sad. But I would just say, go back to where you kicked us off, like that hierarchy and needs for like my own kind of perspective, and maybe it aligns with other people, and maybe it doesn't, so throw in the mix. I think it starts with money, because if you don't have money, you don't have choices. So fiscal stewardship comes first, and it should be like guiding over everything. And then second, for this community, I think it's sand. If the beaches aren't secure and on a plan that's been working as well as our current plan has worked for 20 years, then we're nowhere, because everything else falls apart. No value, community, security, safety. So sand has to come first. And then the rest of it are quality of life priorities. Whether the roads are safe, or whether we have better staffing in public safety, or whether the forest works better, what have you. But to me, like that's kind of a hierarchy that I can get used to no matter what. And I don't know whether it is or isn't useful to help coalesce others alongside that. Obviously, thank you very much.
I think the low attendance here indicates y'all doing a good job.
But we'd love to get more people to,
I'd like to say, kudos to public works. The things they juggle in something. You talk about cutting down the trees, and whether you agreed or didn't, that was a tremendous amount of work. All this stuff, getting all the recycles on and off the island, doing all that stuff. And they're sort of unsung heroes. They work at a time they're, it's like unless you see them on the roads, we appreciate it.
things they've done with grinder pumps,
Pardon
things they've done with grinder pumps, then
Oh, yeah.
heroic.
me? Yeah.
I will pass that on and just add, with our online portal request, if you have something you need done, I'd say probably 90% of what those requests go directly to Public Works. And that, in addition to that, or in between that, the mayor may get a call, and he will call me. And I'd say a lot of the times, it's something that we have to get Public Works to address. So that's all to say that, they're juggling a lot. At times, they're doing the best they can. And I drive down some roads that could probably be trimmed back a little more now, but some things we may have to wait till we just get out of the season that we can catch up on. But yeah.
Well, and when big events happen, they're always out there. You've been out there. You've been out there on the front lines. of Big events. At the south.
Just cut that tree down of Fort Holmes Trail where that can get kind of cleared up. And you see on Facebook, like, the village is coming to take care of it right now, right?
Yeah.
That's great.
I want to give a shout out to public safety, Jen. My granddaughter was here and she got called doing it right, so she got a
Not doing it right, yeah.
And that, when you talk about trying to change behaviors, positive encouragement tends to be more productive than negative. And so what I've heard a lot is that we're dealing with people issues, and the way people choose to parent or the way people choose to behave. And we have very limited control over how other people behave. But that was awesome because she's 3 years old and it stuck with her. It really did. It resonated. And so thank you for doing that. At first I thought we were in trouble. They got grandma here. I'm like, oh, she got caught doing it.
I will pass it on. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course.
Well, thanks so much for coming. I think, what I was saying at the very beginning, I'd love for you to go back, get your neighbors and talk about stuff. I think that, input we got today is very valuable and it's encouraging to get feedback. So get out and talk to other people would be good. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.